Welcome to our discussion on COVID-19 and its impact on education. And to help us unpack that today is the principal of Maxwell Adventist Academy. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
And tell me something about Maxwell Adventist Academy.
Well, Maxwell is a very unique school. I don't think you will find any other school in the world that's really like Maxwell. For one thing, we have gazelles running all over the campus, which is highly unusual. But beyond that, Maxwell has a rich history. It was founded in 1947, and from that time until now, it has evolved quite a bit. Initially, it was just pretty much primarily for missionaries' children. And over the time, over the years, of course, the number of missionaries has declined, and the number of local students, or I shouldn't say local, they're international students, has increased. So right now we still have a lot of missionary children. We have about 35, 36 missionary children, and the balance are just other people that are looking for a really quality education. To add to that, Maxwell, is a Seventh-day Adventist school. It is founded on the principles of Seventh-day Adventist Education. So we believe in holistic education. So I like to think of it kind of like a three-legged stool. If you have four legs on a stool, it can shake around if the floor is uneven. But when you have three legs, it's really solid. No matter what surface you put it on, it's going to sit solid. And therefore, I think that's a good analogy to explain the philosophy of Adventist education. We believe in the education of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. So we are concerned with the holistic view of education. We also believe very strongly that the work of education and redemption are the same.
What makes Maxwell Adventist Academy different from other public schools or just other schools?
I think it really boils down to why we exist. Why are we here? So many schools today, their focus is just on getting a strong educational foundation so that the child can go on and have a really successful career, successful in the eyes of the world, make a lot of money, that type of thing. But for Maxwell, we want to instill in our students a sense of purpose. Their life is for a reason. It's not just here for self-gratification or fulfillment. They exist on this planet to advance the cause of God in whatever capacity, their talents would lend themselves to. It's not one size fits all, Everybody has unique talents, so they'll go in different directions, but in whatever direction they develop those talents, then we would expect and hope and pray that they will choose to use those for God's cause. So I think that really is a big difference right there. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Now, how are you as a school dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and what are you doing to make sure the school continues to run and function?
Yeah. Well, like so many, we were thrust into this, completely unawares. It was like, what is happening, And as we saw it unfolding, I became convinced that we needed to take some quick action before it was too late. I didn't mention early on, but Maxwell Adventist Academy is a boarding school. Okay, it's a boarding school that makes it a little bit trickier in the COVID situation because we have these students here from many different countries, and they're far away from their parents. So in that situation, I began to think, well, what happens if we get locked down or something like that happens, and then we have these children here? What are we going to do with them? We're going to be worried about taking care of our own family and our own situation. How are we going to deal with these kids if they're still here? So it was about March the 13th, I think, and 14th, right in there, we made a rapid decision to send them home. So kids began making bookings on flights and leaving. And actually, the last two sisters, the two girls that left here, They left on the last flight before they closed the airport.
Wow.
We
Wow.
just got them out. I mean, it was in the last little bit of time. Otherwise, they would have been stranded here. Yeah, so that's the first thing. We sent the kids home. But then we had a staff meeting immediately after, and we said, okay, what are we going to do now? We have to see that the educational program of these kids is not disrupted. And so we scrambled really fast, and we set up, online platforms for education. We have our preferred method. We're using Moodle. Moodle is a free, open source learning management system. However, not all of our staff were very comfortable with that. So because of the rush, we allowed some to do different things. So we're also using Google Classroom, Google Meet. We're also using Zoom a little bit. Mostly, I believe the bulk of our teachers are doing asynchronous education rather than synchronous. So we don't have a time every day where, okay, log in students and then here's your teacher. We're not doing that because we have kids in different time zones. They're scattered all over and it becomes extremely difficult. And then some have internet issues, at the time of the class, perhaps the lights will be off or the internet will be down. So mostly we're recording videos of instruction and putting assignments up. Students are submitting those electronically, watching the videos, submitting the assignments electronically. I know I teach one class. As principal, I'm teaching one class, Algebra 1. How do you teach math online?
Exactly. We would like to
Have
know
you ever
how-
tried to put a square root sign in, in a Google document or something? It's tricky. So I had to work through a number of different software platforms. I'm using a little program called Snagit, S-N-A-G-I-T, Snagit. And that one captures your screen and your voice, okay? And then I'm using Microsoft OneNote as a whiteboard. Fortunately, I had a laptop which is a touch screen. So I can actually take my finger and I can write the math on the screen and they can see it in the video. So they're hearing my explanation. I have different colors of markers. I can write in red, in green, in blue. I have a big yellow marker. I can circle important points.
Wow.
So that's the way we've gone about it. It's been a struggle, I will say, not only for the students, but for the teachers. There's been a huge challenge to bring us up to a point where the instruction, I think, is good, is strong, but it takes a lot of time. I will say teaching online is way more time-consuming than teaching in the classroom. You make a video and then you're like, oh my, what did I just say? I need to edit that. It takes time.
I can see a lot of innovation and creativity having to go into it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've discovered sides of yourselves you never knew you could actually.
Absolutely. Fortunately, for myself, I'm pretty good with technology. So it wasn't perhaps as rough as it is for some. I really feel for any teacher that was put in this situation where they have to suddenly teach online. Because it's a huge, huge jump, in terms of the technology, in terms of the knowledge you need. Many things about it make it really challenging. But we've done it, and I will say it's going forward strong. At Maxwell, all of our classes, we even have music theory class happening online. We even did personal fitness. Kids are doing their, aerobic exercises. That's another thing that makes Maxwell different.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, we have a personal fitness program that we've recently instituted. So kids start their day, that is when they were on campus, they were starting their day with 25 minutes of cardio exercise, which there's a lot of research to show that when kids get vigorous exercise, where their heart rate is really up there for a sustained period, it improves their learning ability. They do better in school. They retain things easier. I would just suggest to any viewer that might be interested, read the book called Spark by Dr. John Rady. It's an amazing book. You will find out that exercise does tremendous things for learning It also does tremendous things for your mood. If a child has problems with depression, exercise, a wonderful remedy.
Thank you so much for that. I will sure have to look for that book too. What can other Adventist schools learn from Maxwell's experience?
Well, I would say, number one, trust yourself. Jump in and go, with this online platform. It's not easy, but you can do it. That's number one thing I would say. Take courage and just grab hold of it and begin teaching your classes online. If you haven't already done so, you can begin doing that. I think there's a lot of fear, apprehension. I've never done this before as a teacher. How am I going to communicate to my students effectively online? And what I would say is just believe in yourself. Do it as a teacher. Do it as an administrator. Don't hesitate. Just jump in and go, and you will figure out a way. People are innovative. They learn. They adapt. When forced with very difficult situations, people adapt, and our teachers have done so, and I know others can do so as well. So just believe in yourself. My first few videos, I don't think they were very good. But they kept getting better in terms of my ability to teach math online. I kept improving, and I think it's pretty good at this point.
Wow. Yeah. What long-term impacts will the pandemic have on the school?
Well, I'm not a prophet, but I could say that there's going to be some impact. We're not sure what's going to happen to our enrollment. We don't know when. For example, we don't know when the lockdown will be lifted. Since we're a boarding school, an international boarding school, we're waiting to see when will the international airport reopen here in Nairobi, JKIA. When will that reopen? We don't know. If it doesn't reopen, we're going to continue online instruction. We're not sure if all students will prefer to keep going that way. Perhaps some schools will open in other countries. We could see maybe some shift of students, though I think by and large our students are pretty loyal, the families are pretty loyal. I think they'll stay with us. One thing I can say, I believe that this experience that we've gone through will certainly help us to be less, not to take things for granted, We think that we're secure. We think that everything will be fine. But the reality is, we need to have contingency plans. We need to be always recognizing the fact that the environment can change, and it can throw us in a loop. Throw us down a different path that we never expected. I do foresee that online education will remain a more important part of Maxwell after this. So I don't know. That's a stab at your question. But the reality is, I'm not quite sure all the impact it's going to have on us.
I can imagine so many places didn't have business continuity plans, and I'm sure this is something we may think of putting in place as well as we go forward. Yeah. What advice would you give to parents who have children learning from home and online?
Well, number one, be involved. Be involved. As a parent, you really need to be involved, because a child can be sitting in front of a computer. They are not necessarily studying. They can have several windows open, and when they see mom or dad coming, click, and oh yeah, I'm watching my video here. But in reality, it's not always so. So I would really encourage you, stay totally involved with your child. Follow their progress on a daily basis. Help them if you can. Probably some subjects are going to be tough for a parent to help a child in. Chemistry or physics or something like that may be pretty hard, or some of the advanced math classes. But where you're able, assist them, help them, keep them motivated. Keep pushing them, because it's really easy to start missing those deadlines, not submitting your assignment on time, and falling behind. So That's, I think, my number one advice would be really be involved with them to keep them moving. Otherwise, you may think that everything's fine when it's not fine. And of course, teachers need to stay in contact with parents as well and keep them updated on their kids' progress. I had to write to a parent yesterday and tell them that, you know, you really need to check on your child because they're not turning in their assignments like they should be. So the communication needs to go both ways. I would encourage teachers, give your cell number to the parents, you know, give it to the students. I've set up a WhatsApp group for my Algebra 1 class. So my students all have my number. They can text me anytime, say, Mr. Dunder, what about this? Can you show me how to do this problem again? I don't quite get it. And then I can quickly write it out on paper, take a screenshot of it, send it to them, and say, now here's where you're going wrong. You know, let's walk through this, and you know.
Oh, that's very handy. That's clever. What is your vision for the school? Post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, what are your visions for Maxwell Adventist Academy? Well,
you know, I like to believe that we are here for a very definite reason as an Adventist school. We have a God-given mission. What I would like to see is that, number one, we establish the faith of our students. We really root them in a relationship with Christ. We help them to make a personal commitment. And these are not just words. At Maxwell, we are running 4 weeks of prayer every year. So in the first quarter, we have a week of prayer. In the second quarter, another one. Third, another one. Fourth, another one. So throughout the year, they have multiple guest speakers that come and challenge them to commit their life to God. So we really are trying very hard to put our money where our mouth is, you know. We are, in our budget, we put money there to promote these types of activities. So, number one, establish the faith of the student. Number two, build within them a strong commitment to Christian service, to a life of Christian service. And that can come in a variety of ways. You know, some of our kids may end up being a pastor or something. That's great, and we'd be delighted. But that's not the only way you serve, you know. We can have doctors, we can have nurses, we can have engineers, we can have, you know, teachers, you name it, any occupation, musicians that can dedicate their life in Christian service. So we want to build that commitment, and we do that through a variety of ways. One of the key ways that we're doing that is getting kids involved in outreach, in doing something for their community. The pandemic has kind of thrown a wrench in this, kind of messed us up, but we've been organizing to drill a well near Masai Mara for some Masai girls who are disadvantaged out there. There's a center out there. We're drilling a well for that center. We've raised about $12,000, and we're just waiting for the trucks to be able to be out there again. And when our students come back, whenever that is, we're going to go drill that well. Have students present when they see the water come out of the ground, when they see the excitement of those young girls when they get clean water. You know, right now they're drinking muddy water out of a small stream. Very sad. We can give them clean water. Why not? You know, as students, learn that you can dedicate your life, you can use your talents to do good for other people. So that's the number two thing. And the number three thing is we, of course, train them for success. Whatever career they choose to follow, we want to make sure that they're ready, you know. You know, one of the sad things is when a student leaves secondary school, their high school, they finish. By the way, we run a U.S. curriculum. That's why I said high school. We're using a U.S. curriculum, which is a little different. That's another unique thing about Maxwell. But one of the sad things is when a student leaves their secondary level and they move on to university, and they get there and they say, oh, I want to be an engineer. And then they do just like one semester or two, and then they find out, wait a minute, I am not prepared for this. And suddenly it's like, oh, I have to change my major. What will I study now? Because they're not ready. So we are trying very hard to see that everybody has an adequate foundation, a strong foundation, if you like, in pretty much all the subjects, so that when they move on to the university level, they make those life-lasting choices for what they will study, that they'll be ready. So again, establish their faith, build their commitment to Christian service, and train them for success. This is what we believe in. Commitment of their life to Christ. You know, God is the best employer. You know, He's a wonderful employer. You know, once you put your life in His hands, then He can take you wherever He sees that you will serve best, because He knows. So that's our goal. Yeah.
If a parent asked you as to why they should send their child to Maxwell Adventist Academy, what would you say?
Well, I would probably repeat some of the things I just said. Mm-hmm. But I would say if you are, as I know many parents are, I've heard so many testimonies of parents who say that, you know, the school where my child is now, you know, they're getting involved in bad things. They're being drawn away from God, drawn away from the way we've tried to raise them. If, as a parent, you know, I would say to our parents, if as a parent that's your concern, then Maxwell's a great school for you to choose. It's not just another school. If you send your child to Maxwell, if a parent sends their child to Maxwell, then they should know that that child is going to have multiple opportunities to choose God, to choose to use their life for Him, for His service. They will be trained academically in a very strong way. You know, Maxwell has a rigorous program. Nobody sits around idle in Maxwell. They're like really working hard, you know. So know that it will be something where it's very intentional, where we're deliberately trying to reach their child for God and train them strongly in an academic way. There's one other thing about Maxwell that I would say is another reason. We teach our students how to work. This is something unique in Adventist education, and probably not even all Adventist schools are fulfilling it, you know, very well. We are putting every child in some form of a work setting. Some are washing dishes in the cafeteria, some are cleaning the floors, some are grading papers for teachers. Every child has some work experience, because all the evidence shows when they have that, when they finally become mature adults, they value employment, they value their work, and they're willing to jump in and help out wherever needed, you know. So we train kids to be industrious. So this is another difference about Maxwell. Everybody has not a lot of time. They spend about an hour or two sometimes per day in their employment. So they're paid for that, and it teaches them good skills. It teaches them responsibility. What a great word for teenagers, eh? Responsibility.
Exactly. And also, I'm sure they get to learn that when you work, there's a reward for it.
Absolutely.
And I know you touched on the philosophy of Adventist education, but if someone wanted to know exactly what the philosophy of Adventist education is and how you're doing it at Maxwell, how would you explain it to them?
Well, I would come back to one of my early statements, and that is the work of redemption and education are one and the same. Some people may have a hard time understanding that, but we believe strongly that when a young person commits their life to God, you know, then they have the assurance that salvation is theirs. Their life will be transformed. We've seen many times a student that is just a mediocre student, when they make a commitment to God, suddenly they begin to clean up some of those other things, you know. They begin being more responsible. They begin studying more. So we believe that when you educate a young person, when they commit their life to God, their life becomes complete, and everything will benefit. You'll see their social life improve. You'll see their academics improve. So to me, the philosophy is rooted in that one statement, that the work of education and redemption are one and the same. We feel like if a student leaves Maxwell, now they can choose. Nobody's forced. You know, it's a free. God values free choice. Yes, but when they leave Maxwell, if they have not had an opportunity to choose God, then we've really failed in our education. But I assure you, they have many opportunities to choose. Many opportunities.
We've come to the end of our program, but what message of encouragement do you have for parents, for students, for teachers, a message of hope that will carry them through this crisis?
Well, number one, there's always hope at the end of this tunnel that we're in, you know? There's light at the end of that tunnel. This thing is going to pass. It may not pass in the way that we anticipate, but life will eventually come back to maybe slightly different in some ways, but it's going to return to more of a normal situation, okay? So don't give up, don't despair, because God is in control of all these things. So I would say the number one thing is recognize that this pandemic that we're facing, yes, it's brought on us by the devil, but God is still in control. He's managing the affairs of this world, leading us toward a new life, a world to come, you know. The return of Christ, I am convinced, cannot be that far away. You know, we're not time setters. We're not trying to go out there and say that, oh, the world is ending. No, just think of it. One small virus, huh? That's a small little tiny thing. Look how it threw the whole world into chaos. Yeah, one small virus. It should make us realize that our life, number one, is vulnerable. We are fragile. We need to have dependence on God. And so the hope I would give to anybody out there listening is put your life in God's hands. Trust Him. Huh? Trust Him, because when you do, you have nothing to fear. Huh? You know that if I die, if I live, so long as my life is hid in Christ, so long as my life is hid with Him, I have no need to fear. Of course, we be careful. We're not foolish. We put our mask on when we need to and whatever like that. But at the same time, after we've been careful and we've done what we can, then the rest is in God's hands. Trust Him. You have nothing to fear so long as your life is right with Him. So take courage, because God is in control. That's what I would say. And the other thing I would say to parents, you know, the other message of hope, if you're looking for a school where you've not found what you've needed before, and we have a very different program from most schools.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dunder, for sharing with us your experiences and what you're doing during this pandemic. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Viewers, thank you so much for joining us. There you have it. You can learn something from Maxwell Adventist Academy. I learned that I need to be fit, exercise, so that I can improve my well-being. Thank you so much.